Coming back from my previous life, I decided to avoid every opportunity to cross paths with Ethan Jiang. This time around, when he said he wasn't going home for the holidays, I packed my bags and returned to the village alone. When he helped Lucy Snow rent a place next door, I moved out when he chose to stay and work at the university. I applied to a school in the Northwest in my last life. Even when I was old, even our children urged me to divorce him. They said it was so he and Lucy could finally be together after death, as their tragic love story deserved. As I stared at the acceptance letter in my hand, tears almost fell. No one knew I had been reborn. At the very last moment, I had changed my university application to the Northwest Institute of Technology. Even my teacher was surprised. "Didn't you say your fiancé was staying at the university? How could he wait for you if you go so far away?" I smiled and replied brightly, "It's the era of free love. Now, childhood betrothals are just remnants of a feudal society completely outdated." The teacher, seemingly impressed by my resolve, patted my shoulder with approval. Leaving the school, I followed the crowd toward home. In my last life, I didn't even attend university. My wedding to Ethan was just a few days away, and shortly after I had a child. That was the end of my education. Ethan stayed at the university for a while before joining the army. From then on we lived separate lives. He climbed the ranks and wherever he went, Lucy Snow and her daughter followed. I, on the other hand, was trapped in a small corner of the world, caring for his parents and raising our children. I watch my kids grow, once clinging to me, but eventually drifting closer to their father. One day I even learned about Ethan and Lucy's daughter's wedding to my son, through a photo from a friend after the ceremony had taken place. The picture showed Lucy and Ethan, smiling warmly as they watched their daughter-in-law pour tea for them. My own son had urged me to divorce Ethan more than once. "Mom-Dad has suffered his whole life. If it weren't for you, he would have been with my mother-in-law long ago. You two aren't a good match. Why won't you let go?" Even my daughter-in-law refused to see me. What could I do? I wasn't willing to let go. I couldn't forget the sleepless nights I spent caring for his paralyzed parent, or rushing barefoot through the night when my child was sick, only to find him entertaining Lucy and her daughter elsewhere. Everyone said we weren't a good match. Everyone blamed me for not letting go. But when I looked in the mirror at the weary aged face staring back, I couldn't help but feel defiant. Even if it cost me my life, I would drag them all down with me. In the end, I died after yet another fight with my son about divorcing Ethan. My heart attack came as he stormed out, slamming the door without a backward glance. I called for him, but he didn't turn back. That moment I regretted it all. Why had I given birth to him? Why had I wasted my life like this? But now I've been given a second chance. I'm back to before my marriage to Ethan, and everything can be changed. When I got home, I hit my acceptance letter and started cooking. The 2-bedroom apartment was one of Ethan's perks from work. While the food simmered, I circled the date on the calendar for my university reporting day, with the red pen staring at the marked date. My heart filled with hope. Soon, very soon I would be free. When dinner was ready, Ethan came home as expected, with Lucy Snow and her child in tow. "Sorry to bother you again," Lucy said, smiling sweetly in her bright red coat, her alabaster skin glowing. The little girl, clearly accustomed to the routine, gleefully rushed to serve the food. One bowl for herself, one for Ethan, one for Lucy, none for me. When I emerged from the kitchen, the 3 of them were chatting happily, like a picture-perfect family. But as soon as they tasted the food, they spat it out. "Mummy, it's so salty," the child exclaimed, leaning against the door frame. I watched Ethan scramble to pour soup for them, only to find it shelter than the food. In tears, Lucy whispered, "It seems your wife doesn't welcome me here. I'll stop coming in the future." Ethan walked her to the door. When he returned, he frowned at me. I ignored him and went back to the kitchen to prepare a fresh meal. "You did that on purpose," he said, his voice laced with confusion. "Lucy's husband died and asked me to look after her and her daughter. Your cooking is great and the child likes it." Before he could finish, I interrupted with silence. After a moment, he sighed and said, "Fine. If you don't like it, I won't invite them over again." The next day, after Ethan left for work, I started packing my bags. I planned to return to the village soon, since our families had exchanged tokens and birth dates for the betrothal. I needed to formally break the engagement with witnesses present to avoid complications. Later, as I packed, I came across the embroidered bedding I had worked on in secret for years. I thought for a moment, grabbed a bag and packed everything: embroidered pillowcases, new shoes I had crafted, and other belongings. I walked to the pawn shop at the end of the street. The embroidery that had taken me years to complete sold for 30 yuan. It wasn't much, but at Universit, every penny counts for meals and necessities. I set the money aside, ready to save it for the future. Back home, I marked another large X on today's date in the calendar. Just 20 days left in 20 days. I'd leave this place and embark on my new life. Ethan returned late that night. The food I have prepared remained untouched. I ate at school, he offered as an offhand explanation. But the faint scent of white tea, perfume clinging to him, told me otherwise. He had eaten, yes, but likely with Lucy Snow and her daughter. Knowing he'd defend me by eating here, he opted to dine with them elsewhere before coming home. I quietly cleaned up the dishes and returned to my room. Inside were stacks of my high school books and notes, some spilling over into the living room, due to lack of space. I tied up the books in my room with string, planning to sort the living room items after Ethan left the next day. If I was leaving, none of my things should remain here. As I packed, I heard a knock on the door. I knew it was Ethan. He was always polite, never entering my room without my permission. "What is it?" I asked, unwilling to let him see me packing. There was a moment of silence before he replied. "I was writing the marriage report. Is the 9th of next month okay for the wedding date?" The 9th of next month. The same day we had married in my previous life. I glanced at my neatly packed belongings. "Marriage is a big deal," I said calmly. "I'll check with my family tomorrow before giving you an answer." Another pause. Then I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall. Relieved, I leaned against the bed. Technically, given Ethan's current position, he didn't need family approval to file a marriage report. My parents were gone, and his family had taken me due to our childhood betrothal. To everyone else, I was already part of the Jiang family. This marriage report was just a formality. After all, Ethan was attractive, capable, and kind to me. Anyone could see that I had long since fallen for him. I owed the Jiang family, but I had already spent a lifetime repaying that debt. I didn't owe them anymore. This time I would walk my own path. A path without Ethan Jiang. The next morning, to my surprise, Ethan had prepared breakfast. Fried eggs and 8 treasure porridge. My favorites. In 3 years of living here, he had rarely done this. I sat silently at the table, the clinking of utensils the only sound. "I'll take a leave of absence and go back with you," Ethan suddenly said, breaking the silence. Startled, instinctively shook my head. "I'll drive you back. It's not safe for you to go alone," he said, frowning. I was about to refuse when a little girl ran through the door. Godfather. She had pink butterfly bows in her hair and dove straight into Ethan's arms. Nan Yen. Why are you here? Where's your mom? Ethan asked, glancing toward the door. Yen Yen looked up at me hesitantly. Mom said Auntie doesn't like her. So she didn't dare come. I stared silently at the little girl, who in my past life married my son, yet never once appeared in front of me. Though she was only 3, her beauty was already apparent. No wonder my son, for years younger than her, had worshipped her and her mother as though they were deities. As expected, Ethan quickly left with Yenya, saying Lucy wasn't feeling well. Without another word to me, he rushed out the door with a child. I chuckled bitterly. At least now I didn't have to come up with an excuse to go back on my own. I picked up a pen and marked another large X on today's date in the calendar. 19 days to go. I spent the day organizing the rest of my belongings, tying up my notebooks, textbooks, and exams. Once everything was sorted, I sold them for 13 yuan and headed back to the village. Today I would end the engagement between Ethan and me. The young elders had always treated me well, but convincing them to cancel the engagement wouldn't be too hard. All I needed to do was tell them Ethan's future was bright, and I wasn't a suitable match for him. The village courtyard was quiet, the air heavy and still. A bonfire crackled in the yard, mosquitoes swirling in its heat. I pressed tobacco leaves under a wooden plan, and sliced them finally with a hatchet. The elders sat silently on the doorstep. After a while, they sighed deeply and tried to reason with me. You are you. Even if he has someone else in his heart, you're engaged to him. If he dares not mar, I'll straighten him out myself. Your parents left you in our care before they passed. We can't just stand by and watch you make such a decision. When I remained silent, they exchanged glances. Resigned. You're so stubborn. Fine. Let's go to the brigade. I followed them quietly. The brigade issued us a certificate nullifying the engagement, and in the presence of several elders, we exchanged the tokens given during our betrothal. Relieved, I helped the young elders back home. I knew they only wanted what was best for me. By all accounts, Ethan was a prized match. Even his parents couldn't understand why I insisted on ending the engagement. But I couldn't explain it to them. I couldn't tell them that in my past life, I had suffered enough that even the only child I bore was given to Lucy Snow, making them a family while I lived alone. The engagement was officially cancelled. The Liang's ever-kind said, "From now on you're our daughter." I didn't mention that I was going to the northwest for school, but I stayed with the Ling elders for half a month before leaving. When it was time to go, Mr. Ling walked me all the way to the village entrance, endlessly reminding me to treat their home as my own and to visit often. It wasn't until I arrived at the town to buy my ticket that I found they had slipped 200 yuan into my back. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollable. When I returned to Ethan's apartment, the first thing I did was mark 15. Bold red XS on the calendar. Only 4 days left. Just 4 more days. I was carrying my luggage to my room when I heard the door open. Ethan had just returned from work, accompanied as usual by Lucy Snow and Yen Yen. "You're back," Ethan said, sounding surprised. Lucy gave me a polite nod before turning and walking straight into my room. I frowned as she casually closed the door behind her, leaving my things stacked haphazardly in the living room. I glanced at Ethan. He hesitated for a moment, then explained it's been raining heavily, and Lucy's place has a leaky roof. She'll be staying here for 2 days. Since you weren't around and don't have much stuff, I let her use your room. So you think it's okay to clear out my belongings and give my room to someone else without my permission? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Ethan paused, then added, I moved your things into my room. You can stay with me for now. As he spoke, he opened the door to his room. By the way, where are all your books? There's barely anything left here. I looked at the small bundle he had set on the bedside table and pressed my lips together, letting it go. I replied indifferently. The college entrance exams are over. There's no point keeping the books. So I sold them. Ethan frowned. Even after the exams. You might still need them later. Why sell them? I said nothing. And after a moment of silence, he changed the subject. So what did your family say? I hesitated briefly, then replied. They had someone checked the date. And the 9th. Isn't a good time. We'll have to discuss it later. This was the excuse I had agreed upon with the young elders to buy myself more time. Once I left in a few days, I'd explain everything to Ethan. Ethan didn't seem suspicious. He simply nodded and muttered, Looks like I'll have to pick a new date. With that, he left the room, saying he would make dinner and that I should rest at the desk. By the window, I noticed the marriage report Ethan had been filling out. Only the date was left blank. My gaze lingered on it for a moment, before I pulled myself together and got up to help. However, as I approached the kitchen, I overheard the faint sound of conversation outside. Ethan's deep voice, Lucy's playful tone, and Yan Yan's cheerful chatter. I silently returned to my seat. It was clear that staying here, even for a few more days, was no longer appropriate. Especially sharing a room with Ethan. But with only 4 days left, I had no time to find another place. After dinner, I decided I had set up a makeshift bed in the living room. The day had been exhausting after a long journey, and I had hoped to sleep early. But Lucy, full of energy, had taken over the living room, dressed in a white dress. She practiced dance moves, stretching her legs on a mat. Meanwhile, Nyan Yen kept running in and out of Ethan's room, even bouncing on his bed like it was a trampoline. Feeling suffocated, I grabbed a basin and went outside to fetch water. As soon as I stepped outside, I took a deep breath. Arrow your back, weren't you staying with your in-laws? Mrs. Hua, the neighbor, greeted me, carrying her own basin as we headed toward the well together. I went for a few days and just returned. I replied politely. Mrs. Hua, whose husband worked as an accountant at the mines, had a good life. She often shared homemade treats with me, and we had a friendly relationship. I have to say. Mrs. Hua trailed off, glancing behind me before pulling me a few steps further away. But the well. She tapped my forehead reproachfully. You're too soft-hearted. That Woma. Her husband is gone. Yet she's flaunting herself everywhere. Why would you let someone like her into your home? Ethan is a catch like honey attracting fly. And you just invite trouble right in. Her words were harsh, but I knew she meant well. That man even told people it was your idea to bring Lucy and her daughter here, because you felt sorry for them. Can you believe it? He's using you as a shield, so others won't talk behind his back. I smiled bitterly. Of course Ethan would say that he wanted to avoid gossip at my expense. But with so little time left, I didn't want to waste energy arguing with him. Mrs. Hughes sighed and insisted. You need to get rid of her as soon as possible. And if you need help, just let me know. Don't be shy. Though I could sense her curiosity about the drama, I still appreciated her concern. When I returned to the apartment, the living room was finally empty. I grabbed some clothes and headed to the bathroom, only to find it crowded with unfamiliar women's toiletries. The towels and shampoo I normally used have been shoved into a corner. Next to the trash can, in their place were Lucy's things, 2 towels, shampoo and a hairband. Auntie Yan Yan needs to use the bathroom. Can you move? Lucy brushed past me, deliberately bumping my shoulder. My head hit the door frame. Lucy Snow was already crouched nearby, holding Yan Yuan and helping her with her business. When she was done, she turned to me, still standing at the door, and said softly, "Sister-in-law, could you please move? You're blocking the way." Her voice was gentle, but the smugness and disdain in her eyes were unmistakable. I didn't budge. "Apologize," I said calmly. Lucy froze, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground. Yan, ever the protective daughter, rushed forward, gave me a heart shove, and began to wail. "You're bad. You're bad. You bullied my mommy. You're a bad person." Ethan came rushing out of his room upon hearing Yan Yan's cries. "What's going on here?" he asked, clearly alarmed. Lucy's eyes brimmed with tears as she explained, "It's my fault. Yan Yan had to go urgently, and since sister-in-law was in the bathroom, I asked her to step aside, that's all." Ethan glanced at me disapprovingly. Though he didn't say anything in front of Lucy, he comforted Yan Yan with soft words. "Don't cry. Don't cry. How about we ask Annie to apologize?" When Yan Yan continued to cry, Ethan picked her up and carried her back to the room, promising her candy. Lucy threw me a triumphant smirk before following them. I could hear Yan Yan's cries gradually subside from inside the room. Without any expression, I finished washing up carefully, gathered my belongings into a basin, and went back to the room. By the time I returned, Lucy and Yan Yan had left. A colorful box of candies sat on the nightstand, clearly meant for the child. Ethan noticed me tidying up and paused. "Let's talk," he said, his tone deliberate. Judging by his expression, I could already tell what was coming. He wanted to lecture me about being an adult, about not stooping to a child's leave, and undoubtedly to urge me to apologize. I sat down without a word, took a piece of tape, and abbed it against the small wound on my forehead, where I had hit the door frame. Then I held it out to him. The smear of blood was stark against the white paper. Ethan's words caught in his throat. His face turned pale, then flushed. "I'll sleep in the living room tonight," I said, getting up and grabbing some bedding. "Wait," Ethan said, grabbing my arm. "You can sleep in here. Why are you going out there?" He assumed I was angry about what had just happened. With a sigh, he tried to explain. "Yan Yan is just a child. And Lucy didn't mean any harm. You're an adult. Don't hold grudges against a child. There are guests. I know you don't like Lucy, but she's had a tough time. Don't be petty. Okay." I let out a cold laugh. "So you brought her back here and told everyone it was my idea, right?" Ethan's breath hitched. He opened his mouth but said nothing. I shook my head, smiling bitterly. No matter how noble his excuses sounded, his underlying intentions couldn't be hidden for the sake of the elder, and to avoid tarnishing his reputation, I wouldn't confront him openly. But that didn't mean I could forgive or forget. That night, Ethan ended up sleeping on the living room floor. The next morning I packed up all my belongings, planning to find a hotel before returning for the rest of my luggage. When I opened the door, Ethan had already prepared breakfast. Yan Yan spotted me immediately and let out a disdainful hum, pulling the food closer to herself and Lucy. Ethan, holding a plate of fried eggs, greeted me with a smile. "You're up, come." I made fried eggs. He noticed the food hoarded on their side and awkwardly chuckled. "Yan Yan, be a good girl and share some with Annie." "Okay." Ignoring all of them, I left the house. The only hotel nearby was just a street away. I booked the cheapest room for 3 days, paying 21 yuan in total, including a deposit. Afterward, he grabbed some breakfast at a nearby stall, a bag of buns and fried dough stick, before heading back to collect my luggage. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw that my carefully packed bundle had been opened. My belongings were scattered everywhere on the table. Mayan Yen was folding my college acceptance letter into a paper airplane. My mind went blank. "What are you doing?" I shouted, snatching the letter from her hands. Startled, Yen Yen fell off the chai and began wailing at the top of her lungs. Lucy came rushing out of the room. "What are you doing? Who gave you the right to bully Yin Yuan?" she yelled, shoving me aside and scooping the child into her arms. My hands trembled with anger as I carefully unfolded the crumpled letter, making sure it wasn't damaged. "Bully her? Why don't you look at what she's done? Who told you to touch my things? Get out of here." Lucy stood up holding me in Yuan and sneered. "You're not even married to Ethan yet. This isn't your house to order us around." She walked toward the door but paused to add, "Even if you do marry him, you'll never win against me." The door slammed shut. Lucy's hostility only surfaced when Ethan wasn't around. In the past, I had been insecure and timid in the face of her beauty and talent. As a star performer in the art troupe, she had every advantage: looks, career, and charisma. I always thought I could never compete with her. But now, having a second chance, I realize why should I even try in Ethan Zhang's heart. Lucy Snow was always the most important. But aside from him, wasn't there more to my life? I could go to college. I could contribute to the development of my country. I could see the world, broaden my horizons, and enrich my knowledge. This swamp of a situation would only hold me back. After finishing my packing, I drew another bold X on the calendar. Then I shouldered my bag and left for the hotel I had booked. When I was first reborn, I considered confronting Lucy at her workplace. After all, she had ruined my previous life. My anger was hard to suppress. But what would come of it? As long as Ethan remained by her side, even if she lost her job, he'd support her for Lucy. It wouldn't be much of a loss. And as long as I cared about repaying the young elders for their kindness, as long as I didn't want to destroy Ethan completely, Lucy would remain untouchable. The real issue, after all, was Ethan himself. If his thoughts were upright, Lucy would have no hold over him. There were so many of Ethan's comrades from the army. Why wasn't anyone else acting as godfather to Lucy's child? Exactly for the hotel. I tidied up briefly and took out some stationery to write Ethan a letter. Setting aside his constant absence after we married. Setting aside his entanglement with Lucy that lasted a lifetime. I thought back to the 3 years I spent in high school here. Ethan had provided for my food and lodging, and even occasionally helped me with my studies. For that alone, I owed him an explanation. In the letter, I told him that I had already gone back to dissolve our engagement, and had been accepted into a university elsewhere. From now on our paths would diverge, and we'd never see each other again. Halfway through writing, there was a knock at the door. Thinking it was hotel staff, I opened it only to see Ethan standing there, looking disheveled and as though he'd been searching everywhere. The moment he saw me, he let out a heavy sigh of relief. "Finally, I found you. As long as you're safe, that's all that matters." I stayed silent, expecting him to scold me. "All right. Don't be mad anymore. Come back with me," he said as he squeezed into the room, reaching for my belongings to help pack. I quickly pressed my half-written letter under a book, but his eyes fell on a silver bracelet peeking out of my bag. His expression shifted as he picked it up. "Why is this bracelet here? Wasn't it with my mother?" I froze, cursing myself for not putting it away. Earlier in the afternoon, when Yen Yen had rummaged through my things, a small bell had fallen off and I'd fixed it. This bracelet was the token from our childhood betrothal, which I'd retrieved recently. Ethan's face grew more perplexed. Why do you have this bracelet? It should be with my mom. As I scrambled for an explanation, he suddenly chuckled. I get it. My mom must have asked you to bring it to me. He placed the bracelet back into my bag and added casually. Just keep it for now. We're getting married soon anyway. So what's mine is yours. I relaxed slightly, but my hands still pressed firmly against my back. Ethan frowned. Are you still upset Yen Yen was wrong? Sure. But she's just a child. Stop being so dramatic. Do you know how worried Lucy was when you ran out? She even scraped her knees looking for you and is still resting at home. I stared at him, cool eye, and his words faltered. You know, I began with a laugh this afternoon. Your daughter was rummaging through my BA. When I told her to stop your precious. Lucy said I had no right to tell her off. She even said that even if I married you, I wouldn't be able to compete with her. Ethan's expression darkened. What, my daughter? She's just my go-daughter. I ignored him and continued. You use the excuse of taking care of a comrade's widow to get close to her. But if your late comrade knew how you've been taking care of his wife, do you think he'd rest in peace? My sharp words pierced through his self-deception. His face paled and he staggered slightly. After a long pause, he managed to say, Fine. If you're not coming back, stay here and reflect. I'll come back for you in a few days. With that, he turned and left in a hurry, muttering, I never wanted to wrong you. I'll go back and file the marriage report now. I shut the door with a blank expression. How ridiculous in his eyes. Agreeing to marry me with some grand favor, for which I should be eternally grateful. The next day I went to my teacher to pick up my train ticket, worried I wouldn't get a seat. My teacher had gone out of their way to arrange everything for me, and even contacted some acquaintances in the Northwest to look out for me. After sharing lunch with my teacher, I bought some local specialties as gifts for my future roommates. On the last night before leaving, I went to bed early. I thought I'd be restless, overwhelmed with emotions. But surprisingly, I fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning I handed my letter for Ethan to the hotel front desk, checked out, and headed to the train station with my luggage. The 2-day train ride was bumpy, and I could only catch bits of sleep here and there. When I finally arrived at the university, I felt a deep sense of relief. After completing the registration process, my days became filled with intensive coursework. Having never had the chance to attend college in my previous life, I cherished every moment this time. Except for eating and sleeping, I spent all my time in class or at the library. 3 months into my studies, I received the first letter from Ethan. I wasn't surprised he had found me. A month earlier, I had already received word from my teacher that he had been asking about my whereabouts. Ethan Jiang had gone to see my teacher, and he knew I was in the Northwest. So when I received a letter from him, I wasn't surprised. In his letter, Ethan said he did not agree to dissolve our engagement. He wrote that in his here, I had always been his wife. He insisted there was nothing between him and Lucy Snow, and acknowledged that he knew I disliked her. He claimed he had already sent her away and would never see her again. He also said he would wait for me to return. Enclosed with the letter was 100 yuan. I put the letter away without replying. And I didn't touch the money. University coursework was demanding, while my grades were at the top of my class, and I had received scholarships. My monthly living expenses still weighed heavily on me. I had thought about finding a part-time job, but when my teacher heard about this, he scolded me and began sending me 50 yuan each month. In his letter he made it clear the money was a loan. And at the end of the letter he cheekily added, "Don't worry. My wife knows about this and supports it wholeheartedly." For some reason, tears started streaming down my face. In my past life, I had experienced despair, regret, and hatred. But I had never shed tears in this life. I had remained composed as well. Yet now the tears came freely. I cried uncontrollably, alarming my roommates who quickly came over to comfort me. After that cry, I redoubled my efforts. Ethan's letters arrived every month, always with 100 yuan enclosed in the final month of the semester. His letter admitted that he didn't think I would ever come back. Still, he promised to visit me and spend the new year together. But Ethan never came. And the letters abruptly stopped. Later, I learned from my teacher that Ethan had married Lucy Snow. My teacher wrote that the situation had been tumultuous. Ethan had originally applied for a transfer to join me. But someone reported him for improper relationships. Since I was gone and unavailable as a witness, the case was suppressed. However, Lucy lost her job because of the scandal, leaving Ethan with no choice but to marry her. My teacher's words were heavy but sincere. In hindsight, you are incredibly fortunate. You avoided what could have been a lifetime of misery. I knew I was lucky. Lucky to have been reborn before my college applications. Lucky to have avoided the quagmire of my previous life. A year later I received another letter from Ethan. The first line read, "I'm sorry." He confessed that Lucy herself had been the one to report him. When Ethan wrote the transfer application to join me, Lucy had begged him to stay. But he refused. Out of desperation, she took a drastic gamble and won. By creating a scandal, she ensured they would have to marry. Ethan admitted that he had only later realized the significance of the dates I had marked on the calendar in the living room. He had always assumed those were the days I looked forward to marrying him. I smiled bitterly as I burned all his letters. As for the money Ethan had sent me, I returned every penny to my teacher, asking him to forward it back to Ethan. 2 years later, before I graduated, I joined the National Infrastructure Project. Project 201, dedicating my life to my country. I gave my years to my homeland with no thought of return. 233333333333333 3333333 333,333 Thunderfists on Seth Font. Ethan Jihan's epilogue that night at the hotel. After hearing Aru's words, I was consumed by anger and shock. I locked myself in my house for 3 days. During those 3 days, I realized how badly I had failed her. I had made a grave mistake. Not in waiting for her to grow up, but in letting my heart stray. In the countless times I had helped Lucy Snow, my feelings had drifted away from the path they should have stayed on. Lucy's kindness, Yayan's cheerfulness, they had distracted me from the fact that I already had a fiancé. I had done things I now felt ashamed of. After 3 days, I made up my mind. I couldn't lose Aru. I went to the hotel to find her. But I was too late. She was gone. I asked everyone I could, but no one knew where she had gone. It was only through her teacher that I learned she had gone to the Northwest. The realization devastated me. I rushed home and saw the silver bracelet in her bag, the token of our childhood betrothal. But by then it was already too late. Her family confirmed that she had annulled the engagement. I returned to the apartment we had shared for 3 years. Lost and broken. That night I drank heavily. Lucy snuck in and saw my transfer application. She caused a huge scene in the aftermath. She lost her job, and her family came to confront me. In the end, I had no choice but to marry her. Afterward, my friends began to distance themselves from me. I wrote letters to Aru, but she never replied. Felt as though the moment she left, she had disappeared entirely from my world. Life with Lucy became suffocating. She kept a tight leash on me, constantly picking fights. My parents disliked her, frequently comparing her to a RU. The stress turned Lucy hysterical and neurotic. Several opportunities for transfers arose, but Lucy sabotaged them every time, accusing me of wanting to leave her and chase after my former fiancé. Each time, I could only laugh bitterly to myself. By now, a rote probably found the mere thought of me revolting, while Lucy clung to me tightly in a rose's eyes. I was worth nothing. As time went on, I watched my friends climb the ranks while I remained stuck. Lucy began berating me, calling me useless. She wanted another child, but we could never conceive again. In the end, we only had Yan Yuan. When Yan Yan grew up, she married and had children. But she didn't marry well. Her husband was abusive, unfaithful and a gambler. Lucy spent her days crying over Yan Yan's situation. Yet when Yan Yan wanted a divorce, Lucy adamantly opposed it. Every argument ended the same way. Lucy would take her frustrations out on me, blaming me for everything. "You're useless. Why did I ever marry you?" Even Yan Yan resented me, accusing me of not having a high enough position to protect her. I had no response. Later, Nan Yan tried to escape his abusive husband after failing to get a divorce, only to be caught and beaten severely. By then, I was old and powerless to help her. Eventually, Yan Yan took her own life, leaving behind a 6-year-old child. I never imagined that in my old age, after losing my daughter, I would have to raise her child. Looking at Nan Yan's son, I was suddenly reminded of years past. A fleeting memory emerged of a youthful figure beside me, her eyes full of me and only me. I couldn't help but wonder, what if I had never involved myself with Lucy Snow? What if I had married Taru instead? Would things have turned out differently? But when had I lost her? I couldn't even remember. As I reflected on my life, I realized just how utterly meaningless it had all been.